My name is Sandy Adamitis, the social media director for the Page International Screenwriting Awards, and your host for the Writers Hangout, a podcast that celebrates the many stages of writing, from inspiration to the first draft, revising, getting a project made, and everything in between. We'll talk to the best and the brightest in the entertainment industry and create a space where you can hang out, learn from the pros, and have fun. Hey writers, it's Sandy. Thanks for joining me here at the Writers Hangout. I'm recording late at night, and Studio City, the jewel of the San Fernando Valley, is fast asleep. All my windows are open, trying to bring in the crisp fall chill of 59 degrees. Writers, remember in the last episode, I mentioned working at Uptown Entertainment on the Universal lot. Well, those Uptowners still in LA, the four of us, had lunch at Dupar's in the farmer's market last week, and we had the best time. Usually in the pod, when I say terms like farmer's market or Hollywood terms, I like to define them for the writers out there who might not know their meanings. I have a challenge for any writer out there who'd like to do some research on the farmer's market and maybe come on the podcast and do a segment. Please reach out to me. You can do a pitch on why you are the one who should do this segment, and you can write me at the Writers Hangout podcast at gmail.com. Now, writers, for today's show, I'm so excited to share an update with you. Remember Elisabeth Finch, the producer-writer on Grey's Anatomy for 8 seasons, who was a fascinating grifter before being exposed for lying in epic proportions? Well, I have an update on Elisabeth. Peacock released Anatomy of Lies, a docuseries based on a Vanity Fair investigation into the life of Elisabeth Finch. The Writers Hangout did 3 episodes on Elisabeth Finch, and those episodes have been your favorite. We combined all 3 episodes into one for easy listening, which is episode 70. The Peacock doc riveted me. I leaned very heavy on the Vanity Fair investigation piece. So, after hours and weeks of research, I was sure I wouldn't be surprised by anything in the doc. But I was, and I walked away with more of an understanding of Jennifer Beyer, Elisabeth's estranged wife, and Jennifer's kids. 2 of the kids, the 2 older kids, are in the doc. They just weren't these characters in Elisabeth's story. That family went from one painful situation to the next, and I feel they will not lose in the end. The first time Jennifer was on camera, she seemed to have difficulty talking, and she looked so tired. Then she seemed to have gotten her hair dyed and just emotionally was in a much better place. I assumed there was time passed between the interviews, but I thought it was so shocking that it was so obvious that I thought it was odd to not address it in the doc. Odd in a way of her mental state, not that she got a new haircut or a new dress. Again, I thought it was odd not to address in the doc. Also, I at least got to see Jennifer's humor, and she had a line in the doc, something like, "I had to tell my friends I met a woman in a mental hospital." She's just so lovely and has so much strength, and I really adored her 2 older children. At the end of episode 3, a title card says that Beyer and Finch, who have been estranged, are now divorced. Jennifer is reclaiming her narrative and her belief in herself. On October 15th, the day Anatomy of Lies premiered on Peacock, Elisabeth Finch shared an apology on her Instagram. And here's what she had to say. The biggest mistake of my life, alongside lying about cancer in the first place, was saying yes to Jennifer's proposal before I was honest with her. The truth is, there is no excuse, no justification. Nothing erases the trauma I caused. The fear, the pain, the anger, the tear, the time. That's a lot of commas, and commas mean a lot to writers. So I'm just going to get in her mind for a moment. I'm going to do a reread. Nothing traces the trauma I caused. The fear, the pain, the anger, the tears, the time. Okay, I'm out of Elisabeth's mind. And I'm continuing. And nothing matters more to me than holding myself accountable in every way. I will continue to repair whatever damage I can and ensure I am not the worst things I've done. I recognize all of this will take time for people to believe. That is the end of her comment. And I welcome Elisabeth to come on the podcast and please tell me what she has done to so far repair whatever damage that she has done to others. I also have an open invitation to anyone who has been hurt by Elisabeth to come on the pod. I am not entrenched in this woman's life, but the last time she made a public statement in the Ankler interview, she seemed to say that she was working on things to be reflecting a lot. I don't recall loving what she said, and I don't think I am loving this. And I held it off. I wanted to read it in real time so I could give you my thoughts. And when you say that nothing matters more to me than holding myself accountable in every way, I will continue to repair whatever damage. And I have not heard from anyone, any of the actors. No, I have not heard. I have not read from the actors, the writers, people involved that Elisabeth has reached out. Now, I know at one time she thought maybe she'd be in trouble with ABC and Disney, so she theorized that legally they could not talk to her. No, you can't put all of that in an Instagram post, but maybe you can. She's a writer. I wanted more, Elisabeth. Come on the podcast, Elisabeth. We'll talk about it. Okay, writers, to review. What follows is episode 70, which is a rewind of all 3 episodes we did on the incredible story of Elisabeth Finch. If you would like to listen to the episodes in order, they are episodes 17, 18, and 48. Then again, 70 is a combination. And now we have this episode where everything is up to date and all in one place. Let's start the show. Hey, writers, it's Sandy. We are going to do a rewind of episodes 17, 18, and 48. The unbelievable true story of Elisabeth Finch and Grey's Anatomy. Rising star and television writer Elisabeth Finch wrote many of the emotional scripts for Grey's Anatomy, exploring cancer, abortion, and sexual abuse using her own life experiences. In March of 2022, Elisabeth was investigated by Disney and placed on administrative leave by the production company Shondaland over concerns about her medical history. Elisabeth told friends and coworkers at Grey's Anatomy she had been diagnosed with a rare form of bone cancer called chondrosarcoma in 2012. She wore a bandage that covered her port, was pale, nibbled on saltines, and took breaks to vomit during work. Elisabeth's cancer inspired a storyline on Grey's Anatomy where the character Catherine Avery, played by Debbie Allen, was diagnosed with cancer like Elisabeth in season 15 of Grey's Anatomy in 2018. Elisabeth also lost a kidney to part of her tibia being removed due to chemotherapy. If that wasn't bad enough, she was forced to abort a fetus because chemotherapy made the pregnancy impossible. Part 1. Elisabeth Finch is a television writer, playwright, and essayist. Elisabeth's writing credits include True Blood, The Vampire Diaries, and No Ordinary Family. Born in 1978, Elisabeth grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, to middle-class parents. She had one brother, and she went to Carnegie Mellon and USC Film School. I'm not sure if she graduated from USC Film School. I couldn't find that anywhere online. I could only find a reference that she attended there. And while she was at Carnegie Mellon, her mother was diagnosed with cancer and survived. Out of school, Elisabeth got a job with television writer Rick Cleveland. Rick's credits include The West Wing, 6 Feet Under, Mad Men, Nurse Jackie, House of Cards, and Claws. Rick introduced Elisabeth to Alan Ball. Alan Ball, of course, is the uber-talented writer, director, and producer of 6 Feet Under and True Blood. He won an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for American Beauty in 2000. And a side note, when I was working on the TV show American Dreams on the Gower Lot off of Sunset, the Gower Lot is pretty small, and the other television show filming at the time was 6 Feet Under. And for a couple of weeks at American Dreams, the POC, the production coordinator, Brenda Poulos, was fostering a litter of puppies that she found, I believe, abandoned in a lot. And the showrunner, Jonathan Prince, was cool with Brenda bringing all the puppies. I think there was about 8 of them, all the puppies to the production office every day while she was trying to find them homes. There was a small area outside of the producer's office where the puppies hung out. And one day when I was sitting on the floor with a lap full of puppies, Alan Ball came by to talk to Jonathan Prince. I remember that Alan had to kind of sidestep all these puppies and get over 2 puppy gates. And he was pretty wide-eyed at the time. And I remember wondering what the heck he was thinking was going around here at American Dreams. Later in the day, and I have to say, I don't know if this part is true, but I remember later on the day, Alan's assistant called over to the American Dreams production office and adopted one of the puppies. So Alan, if you're listening, and I'm sure you listen to the Writers Hangout, Alan Ball, did you take one of the puppies and what did you name that puppy? Okay, BTE, back to Elisabeth. Alan hired Elisabeth as a writer's assistant on True Blood. And 6 weeks into that job, the writer's strike hit in 2007. Elisabeth went on a 2-day hike and got her foot lodged in the roots of an oak tree. She had to have 4 surgeries over the next 4 years, but it couldn't be fixed. She kept working and wrote her first episode of True Blood in 2008. Good for her. According to IMDb, in 2010, she wrote 2 more episodes. So I'm assuming she was promoted to staff writer. In 2012, Elisabeth was hired as a story editor on the CW's Vampire Diaries. Before starting, she got knee replacement surgery and is quoted in Elle magazine as saying, "I expected my surgeon to wake me up from my morphine haze to say the problem was finally fixed. Instead, he said, 'There's something we need to discuss.'" The doctor said Elisabeth's knee was now functional, but a PET scan had revealed a tumor encroaching on her spinal column, chondrosarcoma. Chondrosarcoma is one of the 3 forms of primary bone cancer. The doctor said to Elisabeth, "I've never seen anything like this, especially in someone your age. Nothing about this is going to be easy." Chondrosarcoma is rare and accounts for less than 1% of all the cancers. Elisabeth was still digesting the news when her mom entered the room and the doctor left. Elisabeth said she told her mother her knee replacement surgery had worked and didn't mention the cancer. The doctor wanted Elisabeth to take an indefinite leave of absence from work, saying chemo deserved her solo attention. Elisabeth said no and felt the doctor was skeptical of her commitment to getting well. Elisabeth is quoted as saying, "When you're a young, career-loving woman living happily alone, 3,000 miles away from your family, and on the threshold of true success, work is what you do. Writing is how I made my way in the world. It defined who I am." So 3 mornings a week, Elisabeth went to chemotherapy and then to work because she had an outline due, a story to break, an episode to write. For months, Elisabeth told no one. But meanwhile, the tumor grew. In addition to chemo, she had daily doses of radiation. The first person she told was her agent, followed by her boss, who had kept her secrets and arranged writing schedules and made concessions for Elisabeth. Around 4 months into it all, she began telling family and close friends. On Friday, in June of 2012, Elisabeth wished the writer's room a great weekend, knowing that after she left, her boss would break the news about the cancer and that she was actually headed to Minnesota for a 6-week intensive drug protocol. Her spinal tumor had grown to the point that surgery was too risky. During the protocol, Elisabeth wrote in an article for Elle magazine, "Mercifully, work also left me with scripts to edit, revisions to peruse. I watched the producers' cuts under a fog of Demerol, punched up dialogue about vampire-werewolf hybrids with a shunt in my spine. I was down 17 pounds, bald, vomiting, but I was stubborn as hell, still working. Somehow, I felt like myself." 6 weeks later, the protocol worked. Elisabeth returned to LA, where drug cocktails and measured expectations awaited. Elisabeth's mother, Joan, was desperate to come to Los Angeles to help care for her daughter, but Elisabeth kept her parents away. When people wondered why she rejected their care, she explained they were overbearing and impossible to be around. Her brother, Eric, a doctor in Florida, wanted to speak with her doctors, but Elisabeth wouldn't let him. People close to her chalked it up to Elisabeth's independence. Elisabeth had 2 shows she was dying to work for, Grey's Anatomy and Parenthood. And when she landed the job at Grey's Anatomy, it was a dream come true. But according to sources at the show, a few seasons into Elisabeth's time on Grey's Anatomy, Krista Vernoff took over as the showrunner. Krista's credits include Charmed, Shameless, and Private Practice, among many, many other credits. Krista did a blind read of all the writers' work to see which would match her own vision. Unfortunately for Elisabeth, she didn't make the cut. But Elisabeth got a second chance when someone at Shondaland resurfaced an old Elle article about Elisabeth's cancer and asked Krista to reconsider. Krista promptly rehired Elisabeth. Grey's Anatomy's room consisted of roughly 17 people and a sacred space where writers shared all kinds of stories and confessions. For 10 hours a day, the group would churn over past humiliations, scandals that had consumed friends, dark family secrets, then mix and match them into arcs of the show's main characters. Elisabeth carried her heart and her cancer on her sleeve. In addition to a bald head and scarves, Elisabeth wore a bandage over a port on her upper chest area. You could see it behind her tank tops and cardigans. She could sometimes be heard retching in the bathroom, and the producers would insist she go home, but she would always say, "Nope, nope, please no. I want to be here. Just let me do 1 more hour." Cancer also afforded Elisabeth certain privileges. She had an extra comfortable chair, and from there she tacitly claimed extra talking rights. One writer described it as when Elisabeth had the floor, she was not to be interrupted and took whatever time she needed drawing out her stories. Everyone else could lose their job for being such a room hog. Also, Elisabeth often had to pull in senior writers to help with her episode. When cancer stories were brought up as potential storylines, Elisabeth would seize the territory. In 2018 came the Debbie Allen chondrosarcoma storyline. In her articles, Elisabeth claimed she resisted sharing her personal story. I wanted to say no, but the loving insistence from coworkers broke down my walls. According to the Vanity Fair article, someone in the room, the conversation actually went a little more like this. Elisabeth, it would be so amazing to give Catherine my cancer, but maybe I shouldn't write it. It might be too triggering. The room. Okay, we'll protect you. Someone else can do it. Elisabeth, no, I can do it. In October of 2018, tragedy hit when 11 people were shot and killed at the Tree of Synagogue in Pittsburgh, the city where Elisabeth went to college. Elisabeth told the writers that a friend of hers from college had been one of the victims. Then a few months later, Elisabeth told People she had helped clean up the remains of her friend's body from the synagogue floor in step with the Jewish tradition. In March of 2019, Elisabeth tweeted, I spent sunup to sundown cleaning up what was left of my friend after the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. As someone who stood amidst the Pittsburgh synagogue carnage, I'll just say, my heart is broken, my brain is broken. I have no words for my outrage. After Catherine Avery's cancer plot was no longer a storyline, Elisabeth became interested in another character on Grey's Anatomy, a young surgeon named Joe Wilson, and proposed a storyline. After meeting a patient who's a rape victim, Joe starts confronting her own past and, as an abused wife, learns that she's a product of rape. A pitch, Elisabeth said, that was based on a friend. According to a staffer, writing that episode was stress-inducing for Elisabeth. She turned to the others in the room to help write it, although her name was the only name credited. I have to say that actually isn't unusual. There are a myriad of reasons why the rest of the writers sometimes have to pitch in and help write a script, and the original writer keeps the sole writing credits. It does actually happen all the time. Okay. Still, Elisabeth then claimed the rest of Joe's storyline for the season. Discussions were had in the room about Joe needing to check herself into a mental health facility to deal with her trauma. At the same time, Elisabeth said she was suffering from PTSD related to Pittsburgh and needed 6 weeks off. She checked herself into a mental health clinic in Arizona. She was no longer wearing the bandage on her upper chest, and she used the name Joe to check in. Hey writers, thanks so much for listening to part 2 of the incredible story of television writer Elisabeth Finch. Once in Arizona, Elisabeth meets a woman in her process group by the name of Jennifer Bayer, who had been in the facility for 6 months. Jennifer is a registered nurse from Kansas and was doing everything possible to be able to see her 5 children alone again. Jennifer was married to a man named Brendan, who over their 18 years of marriage abused and raped her. To the outside world, Brendan was a great guy and doting father. In December of 2018, Jennifer was driving with the 2 youngest of her boys. Jennifer pulled her car over to the side of the road, opened her door, and just started walking. After a few minutes, she kind of snapped out of her fugue state and called the police. Jennifer told the police what she did and asked for their help in finding the boys and her car. The next day, Child Protective Services requested Jennifer come in for an interview, and Jennifer did, and she repeated her story. Phew. Jennifer was then charged with child abandonment. So Jennifer entered the Arizona mental health facility so she could prove she was a sane and fit mother. While Jennifer was working hard to get better, her husband, Brendan, was arrested, tore up an emergency room, and all 5 kids were sent off to foster care. They were there a couple of days, and then Brendan's mother was able to collect them. Elisabeth/Joe and Jennifer started talking, and they clicked. Elisabeth/Joe suggested they become roommates. And that wasn't something normal for people in same process groups to become roommates, but the staff could see how beneficial the friendship was to Jennifer's healing and okayed it. While dealing with the Tree of Life trauma, Elisabeth/Joe started to talk about her brother Eric, and for the very first time began to say he was violent to her when they were growing up. Now, Jennifer had her husband and Elisabeth/Joe had Eric. It brought them closer. Also, the fact that Elisabeth/Joe had similar issues as Jennifer gave Jennifer some comfort in a strange way. After all, if someone like Elisabeth/Joe, a big-time writer from Hollywood, was having troubles just like her, maybe she wasn't crazy after all. During a family weekend, in front of Jennifer and others, Elisabeth/Joe's mother, who was told by Elisabeth to call her Joe because she was hiding her identity, that Elisabeth had cancer. Everybody was kind of surprised to hear this. Elisabeth told everyone she didn't want to talk about it. Meanwhile, Carly, the therapist, in possession of Jennifer's phone, had been receiving all kinds of angry texts from Brendan. When one message said, "I'm coming to get you," security around the facility was increased. Then Elisabeth claimed Eric was closing in on her. Elisabeth's parents had left a family photo album, and inside the photo album, Elisabeth said she found a handwritten letter composed by her brother Eric threatening her. By July of 2019, both women were ready to leave the Arizona facility and head back to their homes. Elisabeth went back to work, and Jennifer moved into a shelter, and she was unable to see her kids except for 1 hour a week under supervision. Future court dates with Brendan terrified her. So Elisabeth asked Jennifer to come stay at her house in California for a while, telling her the house was in Ojai and it had a big gate at the entrance. Elisabeth told Jennifer it was Anna Paquin's house, but that she owned part of it. During that weekend, the 2 women fell in love. Jennifer went back to Kansas and to the shelter, and Elisabeth sent texts and sentimental gifts to her. The 2 talked about a future together. In September of 2019, Jennifer had another court date with Brendan, and to help with the stress, Elisabeth flew her to Los Angeles. Jennifer got a phone call from DCF in Topeka saying, "Your husband has killed himself. Your children are safe." Elisabeth told everyone at Grey's Anatomy she had an emergency and immediately flew back to Kansas with Jennifer. Elisabeth met the kids for the first time. 2 weeks after the suicide and still in Topeka, Elisabeth wrote to the writing staff of Grey's Anatomy. "Hey all, I've been absent and coming back tomorrow. I just don't know who's looped into what, and I'd rather put it out there so no one's in the dark or feeling eggshelly. I've gone because my brother died by suicide. He was on life support for a short while, but ultimately did not survive. I say this not because I need or want anything from anyone. I'm not a delicate flower or whatever. I just want people to know I'm still here, still part of the team. I intended to just power through my episode shoot, but I recognize I needed to take a bit of time away to process." Elisabeth had two worlds she was committed to now, one with her girlfriend and another with her Grey's Anatomy family. Elisabeth took Jennifer on a trip to Hawaii, saying it was a work trip, while she told Grey's Anatomy she was going to Hawaii because she had to reunite her dead brother's illegitimate Filipino baby with the baby's mother in Hawaii. On a visit to Elisabeth's apartment in Santa Monica, the women entered to find the apartment a mess with empty alcohol bottles. Jennifer got really upset and told Elisabeth getting her kids back was the most important thing. She couldn't be around someone who drank. Elisabeth said Eric must have broken in and trashed the place, then later said Eric had gone to the Philippines and per a legal order, he could not return to the States without Elisabeth being notified. November 2019, Jennifer's kids came out of foster care. On Thanksgiving, Elisabeth proposed to Jennifer. February 2020, the couple got married on the beach in Palos Verdes. COVID and the marriage happened at the same time. Elisabeth's health worried everyone. Jennifer began scrolling through Elisabeth's Facebook and discovered she'd been out with a friend when supposedly cleaning up her dead friend's body. Then Jennifer found pictures of Elisabeth with a bandage that was supposedly covering up a port scar? Jennifer knew Elisabeth didn't have one. And when Jennifer was looking closely at the bandages, she could tell that the edges were all lifted, which would let in an infection. Remember, Jennifer's a nurse. Fear began sinking in. After a while, Jennifer asked Elisabeth, "What kind of medications are you on?" Elisabeth listed them off. Jennifer knew one of the drugs to be extremely toxic and that any doctor prescribing it would need to be supervising that patient. Elisabeth wasn't under such care. So Jennifer said so. Elisabeth admitted that she had at one time had cancer and that she had got chemo and recovered. But she loved the attention so much she continued to pretend to have it. Jennifer asked, "So you had chemo once? Then where's your port scar?" Elisabeth was caught. Jennifer unloaded what she was suspecting. "I think you yourself wrote that threatening letter from Eric. I don't think the details about the shooting were real." Elisabeth replied, Yes. But Elisabeth maintained that she was a victim of her brother. Jennifer told Elisabeth she couldn't live like this, keeping all this to herself, and that she needed to confide in someone. Jennifer then reached out to Carly, the therapist she adored in Arizona, but Elisabeth had hired Carly to work with her. Carly had started a private practice. She relied on Carly's reports to show the courts that she was stable and fit. Now Elisabeth had Carly's ear, and who knew what she was telling Carly. Jennifer then re-entered treatment in March 2021, feeling she had to make it work with Elisabeth, who could legally retain visitation rights or petition for guardianship of the kids. Her therapist advised that if she wanted to remain in this marriage, she had to draw a line in the sand with Elisabeth. Jennifer and Elisabeth went on a week-long marriage intensive. Jennifer told Elisabeth that she could not live a lie and that Elisabeth had to tell the truth to her parents, childhood friends, and LA friends. Elisabeth promised she'd do it. After a while, Elisabeth began to own up to her lies. There was no cancer, no friend killed in Pittsburgh, but she held on to the allegations against her brother Eric. Elisabeth would not come clean to her coworkers. And when Jennifer refused to let up the pressure, Elisabeth announced she was divorcing Jennifer. Jennifer asked Elisabeth to tell the kids the truth and say goodbye, which Elisabeth did with a therapist present. In February, Jennifer received a forwarded email from a friend of Elisabeth, where Elisabeth was telling them about her brother's suicide, days after Brendan's. That was it for Elisabeth. She found Shonda Rhimes' email address and sent her a message. Please stop letting Finch tell her stories anymore, because they're other survivor stories. Shortly thereafter, Elisabeth got a call from Disney HR. With rumors about Elisabeth now swirling, the folks at Grey's Anatomy started checking the internet and quickly learned that Eric Finch was alive and working as a doctor in Florida. They reevaluated everything. Like Elisabeth's wild laughter in the room when she said something tragic. Was she laughing at them for believing her? Elisabeth Finch was put on leave of absence from Grey's Anatomy, but ABC is no longer investigating her. Elisabeth and Jennifer are still in the midst of divorcing. Elisabeth isn't talking, so the full story isn't clear. Reps from Shondaland told The Hollywood Reporter that only Elisabeth can speak to her personal story. Hey, writers. Thanks so much for listening to part 3 of the incredible story of television writer Elisabeth Finch. On November 7th, journalist Peter Kiefer wrote an article for Ankler. Peter sat down with Elisabeth for 4 interviews at her hillside property home in Topanga Canyon. Topanga Canyon is very unique, wouldn't you say, Terry? Yeah.
If there's any hippie left in the world, it's on Topanga.
Yes, that is perfect. Topanga Canyon is in western LA. It's located in the Santa Monica Mountains and known for its bohemian enclave, attracting artists, musicians, and filmmakers. And because every story we tell leads to Charlie Manson, I discovered Charlie Manson had previously been living in Topanga, of course, where he had briefly befriended both Neil Young and Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. Members of the Manson family began their campaign of murder on July 31st, 1969, with the murder of a Topanga resident, Gary Hinman, a music teacher who had opened his home to anyone needing shelter. Darn that Manson, man.
He got around them.
Yeah. One of the first things Elisabeth said to Peter was, when you get wrapped up in a lie, you forget who you told, what you said to this person, and whether this person knows the thing, and that's the world that you're caught up in. I don't have to worry about that now. She also said that she missed being on the show. I really miss it. I miss my fellow writers. It's like a family, and one of the things that makes it so hard is that they did rally around a false narrative that I gave. A false narrative that I gave? Oh, she's given herself a lot of grace. And using writer's room words.
That's exactly why they made me laugh about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a writer's way. It's kind of like adding a doily to a lie.
Yes.
Yeah, you've set your lie right in a lovely doily.
Lovely doily. When the news broke of Elisabeth's lies, her phone stopped ringing immediately. Friends never called her anymore to chat or offer her any writing jobs. She is in the middle of a contentious divorce and is no longer allowed to see the 5 kids she once helped raise, which are Jennifer's kids, and her family members have disowned her. Back at Grey's, her colleagues responded with shock, outrage, and fear. We worked with someone who not only said she was sick with cancer, but looked sick with cancer. A coworker said she had lost her hair. Her skin was yellow and green. She had a visible chemo port bandage, and she regularly took breaks to vomit, only ate saltines for long periods of time, and who wrote and talked about her experience all the time. Look, I guess you could say people lie in Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
One of the most iconic stories told over and over is how Steven Spielberg snuck onto the Universal Studio lot and set up an office in an empty bungalow. Spielberg has told interviewers, every day for 3 months in a row, I walked through the gate dressed in a sincere black suit and carried a briefcase. I visited every set I could, got to know people, observed techniques. And also there's David Geffen, who told William Morris Agency that he graduated from UCLA when he hadn't. Augusta Burroughs and James Fry both ran into problems with their memoirs. James was called out and Augustin Burroughs was sued by his foster family he lived with, and he can no longer call his book a memoir. He has to call it a novel. So everybody lies in Hollywood, but there are those lies. And then there's what Elisabeth did. What do you feel and think about that?
Well, the division you've talked about is somebody there's a trail that's trying to be blazed. And they're thinking, if I can just do this, then I'm going to get the objective I'm going after. There's an objective there. Her series of lies, I don't understand at all what she was getting from that. So is this a psychological thing?
In the episodes, which I highly recommend for people to go back and listen to, she was given special privileges in the writer's room. She had a chair, a very special chair. And I know that might sound frivolous, but you do not understand, though, in Hollywood, you're given crappy chairs. And if you want a nice chair to sit in, you have to bring it in. And you're sitting in these chairs for 8 to 9 hours a day.
Right.
So the higher ups always get a nicer chair, but the production company won't pay for everybody. So you have to be privileged to get a nice chair. And she got like a super duper production paid for her because of her medical condition. She got to run the room whenever cancer came up because she was a survivor. And it was said that she sometimes would suppress writers that were below her title and always kind of made it like, you don't know what you're talking about because I'm a cancer survivor. Everybody always had to pitch in and help write her scripts.
Oh.
Because she was sick.
Oh.
And are you going to say, no, can you write 3 acts of Elisabeth's script for her, which you will not get paid for, and she will get paid for in perpetuity? It was things like that.
Yeah.
Was the benefits. And
it's really not enough, though.
No.
I mean, that even then, as you kind of look at these petty, especially the chair, buy a chair.
Oh, yeah, the chair is petty. I just had to explain that in the writer's room, your chair is very important.
And then her getting people to finish her work for her plays well with her last comment that you read about how much she missed writing. Yeah, but you didn't finish your work even when you were writing.
Exactly. I totally missed that point. That is very subtle. That is so true. Do you miss writing, or do you miss all the accolades of the wonderful stuff that you're writing that you didn't even really write? Because your name alone was on that script.
Well, there's the engine to this thing, this accolade thing. I mean, after these things, because everybody listening to this podcast who's grappling with writing something, it's a hideous thing to try to do. It's hard, but at the same time, you're just propelled to do it because it's the work you want to do. And when it gets tough, the only thing you can do is go have a lovely beverage and then come back and keep going at it.
Exactly.
Right.
And she had the best in the business ghostwriting for her, basically. Have you had anybody in your life do something like this to you, or?
No, not even close. And that would be a tough thing for me to absorb.
This is a quote by Stephen Galloway, the dean of Chapman University Dodge College of Film and Media Arts. This is a town that by its very nature draws people who imagine things. The history of Hollywood is full of fiction, as much off-screen as on. So I guess Elisabeth was in the perfect place to lie. Yeah,
you brought up something really, I don't know if you've zeroed in on it, but I have. If you write fiction, your brain will work on that fictional level a lot, and it's a go-to happy place. So I wonder if she's connecting, if the lying is part of the exercise that she's so used to.
And lying can be an addiction just like anything else. I'm sure she gets bumps of adrenaline from telling her lies.
Right. Plus gets what she wants.
Yes. And that leads to more lying and more lying. When she was found out, Elisabeth resigned from Grey's Anatomy. The investigation of her by ABC has stopped. Elisabeth then checked herself into an inpatient treatment at the same Arizona facility because they did such a great job the first time around and stayed 5 weeks. These days, she rarely ventures out of Topanga and says, I wish I had a grid that would show who's not talking to me because they can't legally, who's not talking to me because they don't know what to say, who's not talking to me because they're peed off, and who's sitting there waiting for me to reach out. I have no clue. Between you and me, Elisabeth, it's nobody wants.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to talk.
Category, you're going to have a category of everyone.
Yeah.
That's how that will work.
She went on to say, it's been very quiet, very sad time. Family and friends called me a monster and a fraud and said that's all I'll ever be known for. And soon more truth would come out. The journalist Peter Kiefer points out there are many people in Hollywood that have made a comeback, including Will Smith, who 8 months after slapping Chris Rock is doing press for his new movie. Martha Stewart, who was convicted of a felony charges and served 5 months in federal prison. Mel Gibson starred in a movie alongside Mark Wahlberg in a movie called Father Stew, which is on Netflix. So why not Elisabeth Finch? What do you think?
Well, first, if you are a known face, star, you have a much better chance of the comeback.
Very good point.
The writers, they wear their shame.
Yes. There were moments where Elisabeth, during the whole ordeal, wanted things to stop. And she said, every once in a while, the thought would pop up that I wish I could tell Shonda because of the person that she is and because she has the ability to understand that people do really effed up things, but that doesn't make them an effed up person. She sees people and the antidote to shame is being seen. I can only hope that the work that I've done will allow me back into those relationships where I can say, okay, I did this. I hurt a lot of people, and I'm also going to work my A off because this is where I want to be, and I know what it's like to lose everything. I don't know. Not happy with that statement. I don't see any growth. I see her now saying, hey, I'll be great in a room because I was a liar. And characters lie, and I can help with that story. During one of her discussions with Peter, the journalist, Elisabeth talked about an upcoming photo shoot that would take place at her house. She was worried about the logistics and weather, and on several occasions asked who the hair and makeup artist would be. After the shoot, she emailed to ask if she could have some of the extra photos that weren't used. She was particularly interested in shots showing her crying.
Ew.
I know. Creepy feeling, doesn't that give you?
Yeah.
At their final meeting, Peter asked Elisabeth what show she would like to work on if she was able to come back. Handmaid's Tale. I've struggled with that show a lot, and I love what they're doing in the world of redemption and what redemption looks like and what accountability looks like. It's taken a lot of hits because people have wanted certain survivors, characters who are survivors, to act a specific way. They want them to be less angry or less this or less that, and characters are reacting in all different types of ways to pain and to suffering. Writing for that show, Elisabeth Finch says, would be a dream.
That just sounds,
Terry, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, it just sounds wrong to me. I mean, the answer to that would have been the remake of Happy Days is what I'd like to write on next. Because it's saying this has nothing to do with her. And what she's saying is, I've had this horrible thing happen. I'm going to look for a show where I can dwell in that more and make some kind of point or something about what mistake I made.
I'll have a character just really do messed up things, but then I'll, help them find redemption, and therefore I can go and be on the cover of a magazine and say the great comeback.
Yeah, it's all about manipulation.
And that's a wrap for the Writers Hangout. thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Your positive feedback will help us keep the show going so we can continue bringing you more future episodes. Remember, keep writing. The world needs your stories. The Writers Hangout is sponsored by the Page International Screenwriting Awards, with executive producer Kristen Overn, producer Sandy Adamitis, and myself, Terry Sampson. And our music is composed by Ethan Stoller.